r/ProRevenge sports parent kept injuring my kids, so I got them banned forever. The crack of my daughter's shin guard splitting echoed across the soccer field like a gunshot. Emma went down hard, clutching her leg and screaming in a way that made every parent in the bleachers wince. But what made my blood boil wasn't the tackle itself, it was the smug grin spreading across Derek Morrison's face as he high-fived his son Tyler for what he called aggressive defense. This was the third time in 6 weeks. 3 separate incidents where Tyler had somehow managed to target Emma with tackles that went well beyond normal 12-year-old soccer contact. And each time, his father stood on the sidelines, clipboard in hand like some wannabe professional coach, shouting instructions that sounded more like battle commands than youth sports guidance. "Walk it off, princess," Derek called out mockingly as Emma limped to the sideline, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "This isn't ballet." I was already moving toward the field when the referee, a teenager who looked terrified of confrontation, waved play to continue without even checking if Emma was okay. "No card. No foul called. Nothing." "That was a dirty hit and you know it," I said, approaching Derek with my hands clenched at my sides. He turned toward me with that same arrogant smirk, adjusting his expensive sunglasses. Derek was one of those parents who treated every kid's game like it was the World Cup final, complete with laminated playbooks and a portable whiteboard. His BMW was always parked in the closest spot, sporting bumper stickers boasting about Tyler's elite athlete status. "Your kid needs to toughen up if she wants to play with the big dogs," he said, crossing his muscular arms. "Maybe consider switching to a non-contact sport. I hear chess club is recruiting." The other parents nearby shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the first time Derek had made these kinds of comments, and everyone knew it. But Derek Morrison wasn't just any parent, he was the son of City Councilman Robert Morrison, and he made sure everyone knew it. He donated heavily to the league, sponsored team equipment, and had somehow maneuvered himself into an unofficial but powerful position in our recreational soccer organization. "She's been playing for 4 years, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady as I watched Emma's coach examine her leg. "She knows how to play. What your son is doing isn't soccer, it's targeting." Derek laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the field. "You're being dramatic. Tyler's just a natural competitor. Maybe if Emma spent less time on the ground crying and more time building muscle, she wouldn't get hurt so easily." That's when I noticed Tyler watching our exchange from the field, his expression eerily calm for a kid who had just potentially injured another player. There was something calculated about the way he looked at Emma, like he was studying her for weaknesses. At 12 years old, most kids would show at least some concern for a teammate they'd hurt. Tyler showed nothing but cold assessment. "This isn't over," I muttered, turning back toward Emma. "Actually, it is," Derek called after me. "And if you keep making baseless accusations about my son, you might find your family isn't welcome in this league anymore. I know people, if you catch my meaning." As I helped Emma off the field, her shin guard cracked clean through and her confidence shattered just as badly, I realized Derek Morrison had made a crucial mistake. He thought his connections and intimidation tactics made him untouchable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The emergency room visit that night confirmed what I already knew: Emma's injury was worse than a typical soccer bump. The x-rays showed a hairline fracture in her tibia, and the doctor's expression grew increasingly concerned as I described how the injury occurred. "This level of impact is unusual for recreational youth soccer," Dr. Martinez said, pointing to the scan. "The angle of force suggests it wasn't accidental contact during normal play. More like a deliberate strike to a specific vulnerable area." Emma sat quietly on the examination table, her usual post-game chatter replaced by a hollow stare. The girl who used to bounce around the house practicing footwork and begging to stay late at every practice now flinched when the doctor gently examined her leg. "I don't want to play anymore, Mom," she whispered as we waited for her crutches. "Tyler always knows where I'm going to be. It's like he's hunting me." That word, hunting, sent ice through my veins. I thought about Tyler's calculating expression, the way he seemed to track Emma's movements during games, and his father's coaching from the sidelines that sounded suspiciously like tactical targeting instructions. The next morning, I called the league office and requested a meeting with Sandra Walsh, the recreational director. Sandra had been running youth sports in our area for over 15 years, and I hoped someone with her experience would take this seriously. "I understand your concerns," Sandra said, barely looking up from her paperwork when I finished explaining the situation. "But Derek Morrison has been very clear about his side of events. He says Emma is a dramatic child who can't handle competitive play, and that you're looking for someone to blame for her lack of athleticism." "Lack of athleticism?" I felt my face flush. She's been one of the top scorers in her age group for 3 years running. According to Derek, that was before she hit puberty and the other kids caught up. Sandra finally met my eyes, and I saw something there that made my stomach drop: fear. "Look, I'm sorry about Emma's injury, but kids get hurt in sports. If you're not comfortable with the physical nature of soccer, maybe you should consider other activities." It was Derek's exact argument, delivered almost word for word. I realized then that his threats weren't empty, he really had gotten to the league officials. "What about the other parents who've complained?" I pressed. "I know Emma isn't the first kid Tyler's targeted." Sandra's expression hardened. "I haven't received any formal complaints about Tyler Morrison. And I'd be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. The Morrison family has been generous supporters of this league, and they don't deserve to have their reputation attacked by disgruntled parents." I left that meeting knowing I was completely on my own. Derek hadn't just intimidated officials, he'd actively rewritten the narrative to paint Emma as weak and me as a troublemaker. That evening, I sat in my home office staring at Emma's participation certificates and team photos from previous seasons. In every picture, she was grinning widely, covered in grass stains, radiating pure joy. Now she was upstairs, asking if she could quit soccer entirely. That's when I made my decision. If the league wouldn't protect the kids, I'd have to do it myself. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on my desktop: Morrison Investigation. Derek Morrison thought his family name and donations made him untouchable. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail: I'm a forensic accountant by profession. Finding patterns in complex data and uncovering hidden connections isn't just my job, it's my specialty. And Derek Morrison was about to become my most important case. I started my investigation the way I approached any forensic case, by following the paper trail. Derek Morrison might have intimidated local league officials, but bureaucratic records don't lie, and they certainly don't care about political connections. My first breakthrough came from an unexpected source, social media. Derek was obsessed with documenting Tyler's athletic achievements across multiple platforms, posting photos and videos that went back years. What he thought was proud parenting actually created a detailed timeline of their involvement in youth sports across 3 different states. The Morrison family had moved around quite a bit: Colorado, Arizona, and now California. Each relocation seemed to coincide with Derek's job promotions, but as I dug deeper into the timestamps and locations, a disturbing pattern emerged. They hadn't just moved for career advancement, they'd been essentially run out of their previous communities. Late nights became my routine as Emma slept upstairs, still in her walking boot. I cross-referenced Derek's social media posts with local news archives, youth sports league websites, and even school district disciplinary records that were matters of public record. What I found made me physically sick. In Colorado Springs, Tyler had been involved in what local news called an unfortunate hockey incident, where an opposing player suffered a concussion so severe he was hospitalized for a week. The article was buried in the sports section, and Derek had managed to frame it as an aggressive but legal check. But the comments section told a different story, parents describing a pattern of targeting, complaints that went nowhere, and frustrated families who eventually pulled their kids from the league. Arizona was even worse. I found court records for a civil lawsuit filed against Tyler Morrison and his father for what the plaintiff described as systematic harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress during Little League baseball season. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but the initial filing painted a picture of a child who was coached to deliberately hit batters with pitches, targeting kids who were performing well against Tyler's team. The most damning evidence came from a parent blog I found archived on an old Phoenix youth sports website. A mother had written a detailed account of her son's experience playing on the same baseball team as Tyler Morrison, describing how Derek would create elaborate charts tracking opposing players' weaknesses, then instruct Tyler on exactly how and when to exploit them. Derek Morrison turns every game into psychological warfare, she'd written. He coaches his son to find each child's breaking point and systematically exploit it. We tried reporting it to league officials, but the Morrison family always found ways to discredit complainants or simply outlast them until families gave up and left. The post had 17 comments from other parents sharing similar experiences. 17 families who had tried to speak up and been silenced, dismissed, or driven away. The thread ended abruptly when the blog was apparently shut down, but I'd found enough. Derek Morrison wasn't just a win-at-all-costs parent. He was running a calculated campaign to psychologically and physically break down other children, and he perfected his system across multiple states and sports. Tyler wasn't naturally aggressive, he was a weapon his father had carefully crafted and aimed at any child who posed a threat to their success. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation in choosing our league as his newest hunting ground. Unlike the smaller communities where he'd operated before, our area was part of a larger regional sports network. Coaches, referees, and officials regularly moved between leagues, and what looked like isolated incidents in individual organizations were actually connected pieces of a much larger puzzle. I spent the next week reaching out to every name I'd found in those old articles and comment threads. Most parents had moved on, wanting to forget their traumatic experiences. But a few were still angry enough to share their documentation. Derek Morrison had no idea what was coming for him. The breakthrough came from an unexpected ally, Maria Santos, a youth soccer referee I'd never met who worked games 3 counties over. She'd contacted me after I posted a carefully worded inquiry in a private Facebook group for regional soccer officials, asking about concerning patterns of aggressive play targeting specific children. I remember the Morrisons, Maria said when we met for coffee the next morning. They tried to get me fired last season when I red-carded Tyler for a vicious tackle that sent a kid to the hospital. Derek Morrison showed up at my workplace the next day, demanding to speak to my supervisor about my incompetence. She slid a manila folder across the table. I keep detailed incident reports for every game I referee. Call it professional paranoia, but parents like Derek Morrison are exactly why I document everything. Inside were photographs of injuries, witness statements from other officials, and most importantly, video footage from games where Maria had been concerned enough to ask parents to record incidents for her records. The videos were damning, clear evidence of Tyler receiving hand signals from Derek before making targeted attacks on opposing players. The scary part isn't just what Tyler does on the field, Maria continued. It's how systematic it is. Derek scouts opposing teams' best players during warm-ups, identifies the smallest or most skilled kids, then coaches Tyler to take them out early in the game. I've seen him use medical timeouts as coaching opportunities, whispering specific instructions about which players to target next. But as I reviewed Maria's evidence that night, my laptop crashed unexpectedly. When I finally got it running again, half of my Morrison investigation files were corrupted. My backup drive, which had been working perfectly for years, suddenly wouldn't mount properly. The next morning brought worse news. Sandra Walsh called to inform me that several parents had complained about my harassment of families in other leagues. Apparently, Derek had discovered my investigation and was already working to discredit me before I could present my findings. I'm placing you on notice, Sandra said coldly. Any further contact with families or officials outside our league will result in Emma being banned from all future activities. Derek Morrison has been very reasonable about overlooking your behavior so far, but his patience is wearing thin. The threat was clear: back off, or lose Emma's chance to ever play organized sports in our region. Derek wasn't just defending himself, he was going on the offensive. That afternoon, I found a parking ticket on my car outside Emma's physical therapy appointment, despite being parked legally in a metered space with time remaining. When I called to dispute it, the parking enforcement office claimed their records showed my meter had expired, contradicting the timestamp on my receipt. Small incidents, but the message was unmistakable. Derek Morrison was flexing his family's political connections, showing me exactly how much trouble he could cause if I continued pursuing him. The pressure campaign escalated when my boss called me into his office the following Monday. Someone had filed a complaint with my company's client services department, claiming I'd used proprietary software for personal investigations, a serious violation that could cost me my forensic accounting license. The complaint is anonymous, but very detailed, my boss explained, looking uncomfortable. I don't believe it for a second, but HR requires a formal investigation. You'll need to provide access to your personal devices and accounts to prove the allegations are false. I agreed immediately. I had nothing to hide professionally. But Derek's strategy was becoming clear. He wasn't trying to prove his innocence, he was systematically destroying my credibility and ability to pursue him. Every day I spent defending myself from false allegations was another day Tyler remained on the field, potentially targeting other children. That evening, Emma found me in my office, staring at my corrupted files and scattered evidence. "Mom, maybe we should just let it go," she said quietly. "I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." Looking at my daughter, still limping slightly, still flinching when other kids moved too quickly near her, I realized Derek Morrison had made his biggest mistake yet. He'd just shown me exactly how dangerous he really was. Derek's intimidation campaign had one unintended consequence: it proved just how far he was willing to go to protect his system. A parent operating in good faith doesn't launch coordinated attacks on someone asking legitimate questions about child safety. Derek's scorched earth response told me everything I needed to know about his guilt. But it also meant I had to be smarter. Direct confrontation had failed, and my traditional investigative methods were being systematically dismantled. I needed to think like Derek, strategically, methodically, and with an understanding of how power really worked in our community. The solution came from an unexpected conversation with my neighbor, Janet, who worked as a grant coordinator for the county. We were talking over the fence while she watered her garden, and I mentioned my frustration with local sports politics in general terms. "You know what's funny about small-time corruption," Janet said, deadheading her roses, "it's never just about one thing. People who abuse power in youth sports usually have their fingers in other pies. School boards, permit approvals, contract awards, it's all connected." That comment sent me down a completely different research path. Instead of focusing solely on Derek's sports activities, I started investigating the Morrison family's broader involvement in local politics and business dealings. What I found was a web of conflicts of interest that would make any forensic accountant's pulse quicken. Robert Morrison, Derek's father and our city councilman, had voted on zoning approvals for properties where Derek later received construction contracts through his development company. The family had financial interests in at least 3 local businesses that regularly received city contracts. More importantly, the Morrison Family Foundation, which made those generous donations to youth sports leagues, was structured in a way that provided significant tax benefits while requiring minimal actual charitable giving. Most of their donations were actually payments for exclusive sponsorship rights and facility naming opportunities that directly benefited Derek's business interests. I was mapping out these financial connections when Emma called me from the living room. "Mom, you need to see this." She was watching a local news report about budget cuts affecting youth recreation programs. The reporter was interviewing Sandra Walsh about potential facility closures, and standing right beside her was Derek Morrison, identified as a concerned parent and community advocate. "We can't let budget shortfalls destroy the athletic opportunities our children deserve," Derek was saying, his arm around Sandra's shoulders in a gesture that looked supportive but struck me as possessive. "That's why private partnerships with community-minded families like ours are so essential." The camera panned to show a new banner being unveiled at our league's main facility, Morrison Family Athletic Complex. Derek hadn't just donated to the league, he'd essentially purchased naming rights to the entire facility. "The Morrison family's continued generosity ensures our programs can maintain their high standards," Sandra added, smiling nervously. "We're grateful for partners who understand that competitive excellence requires difficult decisions." The phrase, difficult decisions, made my blood run cold. It sounded like Derek was positioning himself to have even more control over league policies and personnel decisions. But the news report also gave me something valuable, confirmation that Derek's influence was entirely financial. Remove his money and political connections, and his whole power structure would collapse. I spent that night researching municipal ethics laws and conflict of interest regulations. If I could prove that Councilman Morrison's votes had directly benefited his son's business interests, or that Derek's league donations were structured to circumvent competitive bidding processes, I might have grounds for a formal complaint that would be much harder to dismiss. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Maria Santos called with urgent news. "You need to know, Derek Morrison contacted 3 of my supervisors yesterday, trying to get me suspended from officiating. But he made a mistake. One of those supervisors is my cousin, and she told me exactly what he said." My pen froze over my notepad. "He didn't just want me punished for our meeting. He specifically mentioned your daughter by name, claiming she was injury-prone and that I was helping you fabricate evidence. The problem is, Derek has never met my cousin, and I never told him Emma's name when we talked." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Derek hadn't just been defending himself, he'd been actively monitoring my family and investigating anyone who helped me. "There's more," Maria continued. "He offered my cousin's league a substantial equipment donation if they transferred me to a different region. When she refused, he implied there might be budget consequences for organizations that employed unreliable officials. Derek Morrison wasn't just intimidating me anymore. He was systematically targeting anyone who might support my investigation, using his financial leverage to isolate me completely. But in trying to silence Maria, he'd revealed something crucial. He was genuinely afraid of what we might uncover together. That realization changed everything. Derek's panicked response to Maria meant we were closer to something damaging than I'd realized. I spent the weekend reviewing every piece of evidence with fresh eyes, looking for whatever had spooked him enough to escalate his intimidation campaign. The answer was hiding in plain sight, the timestamps on Maria's incident reports. Derek hadn't just been coaching Tyler to target specific kids, he'd been doing it according to a predictable pattern that could be proven mathematically. The injuries always happened in the second quarter when referees were settling into the game rhythm, always to players who'd scored or made exceptional plays in previous matches, and always in ways that looked accidental to casual observers. But Maria's detailed documentation revealed the truth. Tyler's accidents followed Derek's strategic timeline so precisely that it constituted clear evidence of premeditation. This wasn't just aggressive parenting, it was systematic child endangerment with documented proof. I was organizing the evidence into a comprehensive report when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's school. "Mrs. Patterson. This is Principal Davis. I need you to come in immediately. There's been an incident involving Emma, and we need to discuss some concerning allegations that have been brought to our attention." My heart hammered as I drove to the school, imagining everything from playground fights to academic cheating. What I found was worse than anything I'd anticipated. Several parents have contacted us about Emma's behavior at soccer games, Principal Davis explained, her expression uncomfortably formal. They're concerned that she's been deliberately provoking other players to get them in trouble, and that you've been coaching her to fake injuries for attention. The accusations were so absurd I almost laughed, until I saw the thick folder on her desk labeled with Emma's name. Derek Morrison came in personally yesterday with witness statements from multiple families, she continued. According to these reports, Emma has been targeting Tyler Morrison specifically, trying to make him look aggressive because she can't compete athletically. I stared at the principal in disbelief. Emma is afraid to even be on the same field as Tyler Morrison. She's asked to quit soccer entirely because of what he's done to her. That's not what these witnesses describe. They say Emma deliberately runs into Tyler during plays, then dramatically overreacts to normal contact. Principal Davis opened the folder, revealing what looked like meticulously prepared statements. The witnesses include 2 referees and 4 parents who've observed multiple games. Derek hadn't just attacked my credibility, he'd somehow convinced multiple people to sign sworn statements painting Emma as the aggressor. The man had literally reversed reality, turning his son from predator to victim with clinical precision. I want to see those witness statements, I demanded. I'm sorry, but they were provided confidentially to protect the families from retaliation. Principal Davis's tone suggested she believed every word. However, I can tell you that the school board takes allegations of parents coaching children to manipulate youth sports very seriously. The threat was clear. Derek had maneuvered the situation so that any attempt I made to defend Emma would be seen as evidence of my supposed manipulation. There will be a formal review of Emma's eligibility for school sports programs, the principal concluded. Until that's resolved, she's suspended from all athletic activities, including PE class participation. I drove home in a daze, realizing Derek had just played his masterstroke. He'd isolated Emma from sports entirely while making it look like the school's decision. No matter what evidence I presented now, it would appear I was desperately trying to deflect blame from my own supposed misconduct. But Derek Morrison had finally made a mistake he couldn't control. He'd put his lies in writing, submitted them to a public institution, and created an official record that could be forensically analyzed. And forensic analysis was exactly what I did best. That evening, I sat in my car outside the school district office, staring at the manila envelope containing Emma's suspension paperwork. Derek's witness statements were supposedly confidential, but he'd made a crucial error. Any documents submitted to public schools become part of the educational record, subject to disclosure laws. I'd already filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all materials related to Emma's case. Derek might have convinced Principal Davis to hide behind confidentiality claims, but he couldn't stop a formal legal process. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching the FOIA requirements, I discovered that one of Derek's witness referees, Marcus Webb, had been suspended from officiating 2 years ago for accepting bribes to influence game outcomes. He'd been quietly reinstated after Derek Morrison personally vouched for his character rehabilitation. A referee with a history of taking money, suddenly emerging to support Derek's version of events against my daughter. The coincidence was too convenient to ignore. I drove to Marcus's house that Saturday morning, finding him washing his car in the driveway. He was a thin, nervous-looking man in his 40s who immediately tensed when I introduced myself. I have nothing to say about your daughter, he said quickly, not meeting my eyes. Everything's in my statement. I'm not here about Emma, I replied, pulling out my phone. I'm here about your gambling debts. Marcus froze, the sponge dripping in his hand. It was a calculated bluff based on his previous ethics violations, but his reaction told me I'd hit something real. I don't know what you're talking about. The sports betting charges from 2019. The suspension for match fixing. The financial problems that led to Derek Morrison bailing you out. I was improvising now, but Marcus's face was growing paler with each word. How much did he pay you to sign that statement about Emma? You can't prove anything, he whispered, but his voice cracked. I don't need to prove anything, I said softly. I just need to ask the right questions to the right people. Like why Derek Morrison would personally advocate for reinstating a referee who'd been caught taking bribes. Or why you suddenly started officiating games in Tyler Morrison's league right after Derek wrote that character reference letter. Marcus dropped the sponge entirely. Look, I needed the money, okay? My ex-wife's medical bills, child support. Derek offered to help with the payments in exchange for some favorable calls. Nothing major, just little things that wouldn't affect game outcomes. My heart pounded as I realized what he was admitting. What kind of little things? Missing obvious fouls. Letting aggressive play go uncalled. Making sure certain kids stayed in games even when they probably should have been ejected. He was speaking faster now, the words tumbling out. Derek had this whole system. He'd identify refs with financial problems, offer help, then gradually ask for small favors. How many referees? I asked, pulling out my notebook. I don't know exact numbers. Maybe 6 or 7 in our region. Derek called it investment in proper officiating standards. He said kids these days were too soft, that referees needed to let players develop toughness. Marcus glanced around nervously, as if Derek might materialize from the bushes. But I never filed any false statements about your daughter. I swear that's not what this was about. Then who wrote the referee witness statement in Emma's school file? His confusion looked genuine. I don't know anything about school files. Derek just asked me to sign something saying Tyler Morrison was a clean player who got unfairly targeted by complainers. He said it was for league records, not school stuff. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Derek had collected legitimate signatures on vague character references, then used that signed paperwork as the basis for completely fabricated witness statements submitted to Emma's school. Marcus and the others probably had no idea their signatures were being used to attack a specific child. I have it all documented, I told Marcus. The payments, the favorable calls, the systematic corruption. Right now, Derek thinks he's protected because you're all too scared to talk. But when this blows up, and it will, he's going to throw every single one of you under the bus to save himself. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his half-washed car. What do you want me to do? Tell the truth. All of it. On the record. I handed him my card. Derek Morrison has been using his money and connections to corrupt youth sports for years. He's hurt kids, intimidated families, and turned what should be fun activities into psychological warfare. It ends now. As I drove away, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off or things get much worse for your family. Derek had just made his second crucial mistake, putting threats in writing. But more importantly, the timing told me Marcus had already called him. Derek was panicking, which meant I was closer to bringing down his entire operation than he was comfortable with. I smiled grimly and headed home to prepare my real offensive. Derek Morrison wanted to play hardball with a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering corruption. He was about to learn why that was a very bad idea. The evidence was finally coming together, but Derek's escalating threats meant I was running out of time. That Monday morning, I received a certified letter that made my stomach drop, a cease and desist order from Morrison and Associates legal group, demanding I stop my harassment campaign against their clients. The letter was professionally crafted legal intimidation, accusing me of stalking, defamation, and interference with business relationships. But what chilled me was the final paragraph. Our clients are prepared to pursue all available legal remedies, including seeking protective orders that would prevent you from attending any youth sporting events where the Morrison family might be present. Derek wasn't just trying to silence me anymore, he was attempting to ban me from Emma's activities entirely. I was still processing the legal threat when my phone rang. It was Dr. Martinez from the emergency room, and her voice carried an urgency that made my pulse spike. Mrs. Patterson, I need you to come in immediately. There's been a development with Emma's case that requires discussion. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Dr. Martinez as she pulled up Emma's x-rays on her computer screen, but her expression was troubled in a way that went beyond medical concerns. I've been reviewing Emma's injury pattern, she began carefully, and I felt compelled to reach out to colleagues at other local hospitals. What I discovered is concerning. She clicked through a series of images, x-rays, medical reports, injury photos. In the past 18 months, 5 children have been treated for unusually severe soccer injuries at 3 different emergency rooms in our region. The injuries all follow the same pattern, deliberately targeted strikes to vulnerable areas, causing maximum damage with plausible deniability. My mouth went dry. Are you saying Tyler Morrison injured 5 other kids? I can't name patients due to privacy laws, but I can tell you that medical professionals are trained to recognize patterns of intentional harm. These injuries don't happen accidentally, and they don't happen this frequently without a common cause. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her voice dropping. Yesterday, I received a call from someone claiming to be conducting a quality review of my treatment decisions. They specifically asked about Emma's case and whether I might have overstated the severity of her injury in my reports. The room seemed to spin around me. Derek Morrison is trying to get you to change Emma's medical records. I can't prove who made the call, but they knew details about Emma's treatment that aren't in any public records. They suggested that doctors who file inaccurate reports about youth sports injuries might face scrutiny from state medical boards. Derek's corruption was spreading like cancer through every institution that could protect children. He wasn't just buying off referees and intimidating league officials, he was attempting to compromise medical professionals who might document the evidence of his son's systematic violence. There's something else, Dr. Martinez continued, pulling out a folder. I've been in contact with Dr. Sarah Chen at Children's Hospital. She treated one of the other injured children, and she's willing to speak with you off the record. The meeting with Dr. Chen that evening revealed the true scope of Derek's operation. In a quiet corner of a coffee shop near the hospital, she showed me photographs that made me physically nauseous, a 10-year-old with a shattered wrist, an 11-year-old with a concussion so severe he'd missed 2 months of school. The parents were too intimidated to pursue complaints, Dr. Chen explained. In each case, they received pressure from league officials, school administrators, even law enforcement suggesting their children might face consequences if they continued making false accusations. She slid a business card across the table. But there's someone you need to meet. Detective Lisa Rodriguez with the County Sheriff's Department. She's been quietly investigating reports of systematic child endangerment in youth sports, but she needs someone with the evidence and determination to make a formal complaint. My hands shook as I pocketed the card. A criminal investigation would change everything. Derek's political connections couldn't intimidate law enforcement the way they could school principals and soccer league volunteers. But it also meant Derek would realize his entire operation was about to be exposed. That night, as I prepared my evidence for Detective Rodriguez, I heard a car door slam outside. Through my window, I watched Derek Morrison himself walking up my driveway, his face twisted with rage. He'd come to deliver his ultimatum personally. I met Derek at my front door, keeping the chain lock engaged. Through the gap, I could see his face was flushed red, his usual composed demeanor completely gone. Behind him, Tyler sat in the idling BMW, watching our house with that same calculating expression I'd seen on the soccer field. You have 48 hours to drop this insane crusade, Derek said without preamble, his voice low and threatening. Delete every file, destroy every document, and issue a public apology to my family for your harassment. Or what? I asked, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. Derek stepped closer to the door, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something that might have been alcohol. Or I'll show you exactly how much damage I can do to your pathetic little life. You think losing your job and Emma's school suspension were bad? That was me being gentle. He pulled out his phone, showing me what looked like official county letterhead. Property tax reassessment notice. Funny how homes get randomly selected for evaluation that can triple their tax burden. Usually happens to families who don't understand how to be good community members. My blood ran cold. Property tax manipulation was exactly the kind of corrupt abuse of power I'd been documenting, but Derek was using it as a weapon against my family directly. Then there's Emma's academic record, he continued with a satisfied smirk. Amazing how quickly honor students can develop disciplinary problems when the right people start paying attention to their behavior. Suspension becomes expulsion, college applications get flagged for academic integrity issues. You're threatening my 12-year-old daughter's future because she got hurt playing soccer. I'm protecting my son from a vindictive parent who's trying to destroy an innocent child's reputation. Derek's voice rose slightly, and I realized he'd actually convinced himself this was true. Tyler is a natural athlete who plays hard but fair. Your daughter is weak, and you're trying to blame him for her inability to compete. The casual cruelty of dismissing Emma's fractured leg and emotional trauma as weakness made my hands clench. But Derek wasn't finished. I know you've been talking to certain medical professionals and law enforcement contacts, he said, his tone becoming dangerously quiet. That stops now. Detective Rodriguez is a family friend who understands the difference between concerned parenting and malicious prosecution. She'll be very disappointed to learn you've been wasting police resources on fabricated complaints. My heart sank. Derek had connections everywhere, even in the sheriff's department. No matter which direction I turned, he'd already poisoned the well. But I'm reasonable, Derek continued, pulling out a folded document. Sign this statement acknowledging that Emma's injuries were accidental, that Tyler has never done anything wrong, and that you've been struggling with emotional instability since your divorce. Do that, and we can all move on with our lives. Through the gap in the door, I could see Tyler had rolled down his window and was openly listening to his father's threats. At 12 years old, he was learning that money and connections could make any problem disappear, that intimidation was more effective than accountability. And if I don't sign? Derek's smile was arctic. Then tomorrow morning, Child Protective Services receives an anonymous tip about a mentally unstable single mother who's been coaching her daughter to make false accusations against other children. By the time that investigation concludes, and these things can take months, Emma will have missed so much school and been through so much trauma that her academic future will be ruined anyway. He slid the document through the door gap. 48 hours. Choose wisely. As Derek walked back to his car, I realized he'd just made his biggest tactical error yet. In his arrogance, he'd revealed the full scope of his corruption network and threatened specific crimes in front of a witness. What Derek didn't know was that I'd been recording our entire conversation. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the county sheriff's department, Derek's recorded threats playing through my earbuds for the third time. His voice was crystal clear: property tax reassessment notice. Funny how homes get randomly selected for evaluation. Followed by his explicit threats about CPS and Detective Rodriguez being a family friend. I was finally ready to walk into that building and file a formal complaint when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mrs. Patterson. This is Janet Kim from Channel 7 News. I received an interesting tip about corruption in youth sports, and I'd like to speak with you. My pulse quickened. Who gave you my number? Someone who's been following your situation closely. They said you have evidence of systematic child endangerment being covered up by local officials. Her voice was crisp and professional. Would you be willing to meet for an interview? An hour later, I found myself sitting across from Janet Kim in a small cafe, spreading out medical records and incident reports while she reviewed Derek's recorded threats on my phone. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she absorbed the evidence. This is bigger than just one problem parent, she said finally. You're describing institutional corruption involving city council members, school administrators, and potentially law enforcement. That's exactly the kind of story our investigative team lives for. But before I could respond, her phone rang. She answered with her professional voice, then her face paled. I understand. Yes, sir. I'll handle it appropriately. She hung up and looked at me with obvious frustration. I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson, but I've been instructed to discontinue this interview. Apparently, Channel 7 just received a substantial advertising contract from Morrison Development Group, and management feels it would be inappropriate to pursue stories that might create conflicts of interest. Derek had somehow learned about our meeting and moved to shut it down within an hour. The man's network of influence was more extensive than I'd imagined. But here's the thing about journalism, Janet continued quietly, pulling out a business card. Sometimes the most important stories have to find alternative channels. Have you considered reaching out to regional or national outlets? Organizations that aren't dependent on local advertising revenue? As I walked back to my car, another text came from that unknown number, last warning. Drop everything now or face consequences you haven't imagined. But this time, something felt different about the threat. The wording was slightly off, lacking Derek's usual arrogant precision. I pulled up the message details and noticed something odd. The number was registered to a prepaid phone purchased just yesterday in Arizona. Arizona. Where Derek had been run out of his previous community for similar behavior. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching the families Derek had victimized in Phoenix, cross-referencing names from those old blog posts with current social media profiles. What I found sent chills down my spine. 3 families had filed police reports against Derek Morrison in Arizona. All 3 reports had been mysteriously lost by the investigating department. But more disturbing was what happened to those families afterward. One father lost his job due to budget cuts, another family's small business was audited by the IRS 3 times in 2 years, and the third family moved out of state entirely after their teenage daughter was arrested on what appeared to be fabricated drug possession charges. Derek Morrison wasn't just corrupting youth sports, he was systematically destroying anyone who opposed him, using a network of contacts that apparently spanned multiple states. The scope of his operation was far beyond what local law enforcement could handle, even if they weren't already compromised. I was researching federal agencies that investigated public corruption when Emma found me hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table. Mom, Tyler Morrison is at my school. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean he's at your school? He's in the office with his dad right now. They're meeting with Principal Davis. Emma's voice was small and scared. Everyone's talking about it. They think I'm going to get expelled. Derek Morrison had just escalated beyond threats into direct action. I drove to Emma's school with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. Through the main office windows, I could see Derek and Tyler sitting across from Principal Davis, their conversation animated and urgent. Derek was gesturing emphatically while Tyler sat perfectly still, that calculating expression never leaving his face. The secretary looked uncomfortable when I entered. Mrs. Patterson, I'm sorry, but Principal Davis is in an important meeting. About my daughter, I interrupted. I have every right to be present for any discussion involving Emma. Before she could respond, Principal Davis's door opened and Derek emerged, looking smugly satisfied. When he saw me, his expression shifted to mock sympathy. Oh good, you're here, he said loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. I was just explaining to Principal Davis how concerned Tyler is about Emma's emotional state. He's noticed some very troubling behavior lately. Tyler appeared beside his father, and for the first time, I heard him speak directly. Emma keeps staring at me in the hallways, he said in a voice that managed to sound both innocent and sinister. She follows me to classes and whispers things to other kids about me. It's making me really uncomfortable. The performance was chilling in its calculation. Tyler delivered each line with perfect victim cadence while his eyes remained completely cold. Yesterday she cornered me by my locker and said her mom was going to get my family, Tyler continued, his voice beginning to shake as if he were genuinely frightened. I don't understand why she hates me so much. I've never done anything to hurt her. Principal Davis was nodding sympathetically, completely buying Tyler's act. Mrs. Patterson, we need to discuss Emma's recent behavior immediately. But I was staring at Tyler, finally understanding the full scope of what Derek had created. This wasn't just a 12-year-old who'd been coached to be aggressive on the soccer field. This was a child who'd been systematically trained to be a predator, capable of psychological manipulation that would be sophisticated for an adult. When exactly did these alleged incidents occur? I asked, pulling out my phone. Because I can show you Emma's exact location during school hours for the past week. Derek's confident expression flickered slightly. Location tracking can be manipulated. Not when it's corroborated by school security cameras, I interrupted, realizing I was bluffing but hoping it would land. I assume you'll want to review the footage before making any formal disciplinary decisions. Principal Davis looked uncertain for the first time. Well, we would need to check our security protocols. Mom. Emma's voice came from behind me. She was standing in the office doorway, flanked by 2 other girls from her class. What's going on? Tyler's reaction was instantaneous and telling. The moment Emma appeared, his entire demeanor shifted. The fake vulnerability vanished, replaced by something predatory and calculating. For just a split second, his mask slipped completely. There she is, Tyler said, but his voice was different now, harder, more menacing. She's been. Actually, one of Emma's classmates interrupted, Tyler's lying. The girl stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I saw him following Emma yesterday, not the other way around. He was taking pictures of her with his phone and laughing about it with his friends. Derek's face went white. That's absolutely false. I have the pictures, the second girl added, holding up her own phone. I recorded Tyler showing them off at lunch. He was bragging about how his dad taught him to collect evidence on problem families. The office fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Derek Morrison had just watched his son's carefully crafted victim narrative collapse in real time, destroyed by the one thing he hadn't anticipated, children who were brave enough to tell the truth. But Derek's recovery was swift and terrifying. His expression shifted from shock to cold rage as he turned toward the girls who'd spoken up. Those are very serious accusations from very young children, he said softly. I hope their parents understand the legal implications of making false statements about my son. The threat in Derek's voice made both girls step back instinctively, but I moved forward, positioning myself between them and the Morrison family. Are you seriously threatening children for telling the truth? I asked, pulling out my phone. Because I'm recording this entire conversation, just like I recorded your visit to my house last night. Derek's confident mask slipped for a moment before snapping back into place. I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't been to your house. Funny thing about doorbell cameras, I said, watching his face carefully. They timestamp everything. Would you like me to play the audio of you threatening to manipulate Emma's academic records and call CPS with false reports? Principal Davis looked genuinely shocked for the first time. Mr. Morrison, is this true? But Derek was already shifting tactics, his political training kicking in. This woman has been stalking my family for weeks, making increasingly unhinged accusations. Now she's apparently fabricating evidence and coaching children to lie. I think we need to involve the authorities. He pulled out his phone with theatrical concern. I'm calling the police to report harassment and possible child endangerment. It's clear Emma is being manipulated by an unstable parent. My heart pounded as I realized Derek was about to flip the entire situation. In minutes, I'd go from concerned parent to criminal suspect, and Emma would be left defenseless against whatever came next. But Tyler made a crucial mistake. While his father performed for the adults, Tyler was glaring at Emma's friends with undisguised hatred. One of the girls caught his expression and took a step back, bumping into the secretary's desk. He's doing it again, she whispered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. That look. That's exactly how he stared at Emma before he hurt her during the soccer game. I never hurt anyone. Tyler snapped, his carefully controlled facade finally cracking. She ran into me. She's weak and clumsy and she ruins everything. The venom in his voice was so shocking that Principal Davis actually gasped. For just a moment, everyone in the room saw the real Tyler Morrison, not a confused victim, but a child consumed with calculated malice. Derek grabbed his son's arm hard enough to make Tyler wince. That's enough, he said through gritted teeth. We're leaving. This school clearly can't provide a safe environment for students who excel. As they headed for the door, Derek turned back with one final threat. Principal Davis, I'll be speaking with Superintendent Williams about your handling of this situation. And Mrs. Patterson, you have until tonight to reconsider our previous conversation. The moment they left, Principal Davis sank into her chair, looking overwhelmed. This is much more complicated than I understood. It's not complicated at all, said the first girl who defended Emma. Her name was Sarah, and despite being only 12, she spoke with remarkable clarity. Tyler Morrison is a bully who hurts people on purpose, and his dad protects him by threatening anyone who tells the truth. Emma finally found her voice. Mom, Tyler cornered me in the bathroom yesterday. He said his dad was going to make sure I could never play sports again, and that other kids would get hurt if I didn't stop causing trouble. My blood ran cold. Tyler wasn't just targeting Emma, he was threatening other children to keep her isolated. He said his dad has pictures of lots of families, Emma continued, her voice getting smaller. Pictures that could get people in trouble if they don't do what the Morrisons want. Principal Davis looked like she was going to be sick. Pictures? What kind of pictures? Before Emma could answer, the office secretary burst through the door, her face pale. Principal Davis, we have a problem. Superintendent Williams just called. There's been a complaint filed against you with the school board for failure to protect students from harassment. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Derek Morrison had just declared war on everyone in that room, and he was moving faster than I'd anticipated. But as I looked at Emma standing with her friends, finally speaking her truth despite the consequences, I realized something important had shifted. Tyler's mask had slipped in front of witnesses, and Derek's threats were becoming so extreme they were exposing his desperation. The hunter was becoming the hunted. That night, I barely slept. Every car that passed our house made me check the windows, and every notification on my phone sent my heart racing. Derek's 48-hour ultimatum was ticking down, and I knew tomorrow would bring whatever nuclear option he'd been holding in reserve. At 3 a.m., my laptop chimed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made my blood freeze. You should see what your daughter does when she thinks no one is watching. The message contained a single video file. With trembling fingers, I clicked play and watched security footage from Emma's school hallway. The timestamp showed yesterday afternoon, and the angle captured Emma walking alone toward her locker. But something was wrong with the footage. The video had been edited, splice by splice, to make it look like Emma was following Tyler down the hallway when the original showed her simply walking to class. Sound had been added, Emma's voice saying things she'd never said, words that sounded threatening when taken out of context. The final seconds showed Tyler backing away from Emma in apparent fear, his body language suggesting she was advancing aggressively. But I could see the digital artifacts around the edges where different clips had been merged together. This wasn't just deceptive editing, it was sophisticated video manipulation that would fool anyone without forensic training. A second email arrived as I watched. This footage will be submitted to Child Protective Services tomorrow morning, along with witness statements from concerned teachers and students. Unless, of course, you prefer to sign our agreement first. Derek Morrison hadn't just been collecting evidence, he'd been creating it. The pictures Tyler had mentioned weren't photographs of real events, they were digitally manufactured proof of whatever narrative Derek needed to destroy his enemies. I was still staring at the fabricated video when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Rodriguez, and my heart leaped with hope before I remembered Derek claiming she was a family friend. Mrs. Patterson. I need to see you immediately. Her voice was tense and urgent. There's been a development in your case that we need to discuss in person. 20 minutes later, I sat in an empty diner across from Detective Rodriguez, trying to read her expression in the dim fluorescent light. She looked exhausted, and there was something in her eyes that might have been fear. Derek Morrison came to see me today, she said without preamble. He brought documentation of your alleged harassment campaign against his family, including recordings of you threatening other parents and evidence of stalking behavior. My stomach dropped. Those recordings are fabricated. I know. Her interruption surprised me. Because I've been investigating Derek Morrison for 8 months. The world seemed to tilt around me. You've been what? Detective Rodriguez pulled out a thick folder, glancing around the empty diner before opening it. Morrison's name came up in a federal investigation into municipal corruption. We'd been building a case against his father's misuse of city contracts, but Derek's youth sports activities kept appearing in witness statements. She spread out photographs and documents that made my pulse race. 3 families in Arizona filed formal complaints before fleeing the state. 2 families in Colorado tried to pursue legal action before mysteriously dropping their cases. And now you're the first person brave enough to keep pushing despite his intimidation tactics. But Derek said you were a family friend. Derek Morrison has never met me before today. Rodriguez's expression hardened. When he walked into my office claiming I'd help him silence a troublemaker, he handed me the final piece of evidence I needed to prove he believes he's above the law. She pulled out a recording device. I recorded our entire conversation. Derek explicitly offered to make a substantial donation to the police department's youth outreach program in exchange for shutting down any investigation into his son's activities. That's attempted bribery of a law enforcement officer. Hope flared in my chest for the first time in weeks. So you can arrest him? Not yet. Corruption cases require overwhelming evidence to overcome political connections. But Derek made a crucial mistake today. He demonstrated his methods to a federal witness. She leaned forward. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to ask you to do something dangerous. We need Derek to reveal the full scope of his operation, and that means letting him think he's won. My mouth went dry. What are you asking me to do? Sign his agreement. Let him think you're defeated. Give him enough confidence to drop his guard completely. Rodriguez's voice was steady but sympathetic. It's the only way to protect Emma and make sure Derek can never do this to another family. Outside the diner windows, dawn was beginning to break. Derek's 48 hours were almost up, and I had to make a choice that would determine whether my daughter's tormentor finally faced justice, or whether his reign of terror would continue unchecked. The hunter was about to become the prey, but first, I had to let him think he'd already won. I stared at Detective Rodriguez across the diner table, her words echoing in my mind. Sign Derek's agreement. Let him think he'd won. The idea of surrendering to that monster made my skin crawl, but I understood the strategic logic. How do I know this isn't another one of Derek's traps? I asked, studying her face for any tells. He's been 10 steps ahead of me this entire time. Rodriguez pulled out her badge and federal credentials, setting them on the table between us. Because Derek Morrison doesn't know that his father's construction contracts have been flagged by the FBI for bid rigging. Because he doesn't know that Marcus Webb agreed to cooperate with federal investigators 3 days ago. And because he definitely doesn't know that Tyler was recorded on school security cameras yesterday planting something in another student's locker. My breath caught. What kind of something? A small bag of pills stolen from the nurse's office. If we hadn't been monitoring the situation, an innocent kid would have been expelled for drug possession. Rodriguez's expression darkened. Derek is escalating beyond intimidation into active framing of children. We need to stop him before someone gets seriously hurt. The weight of the situation crashed over me. Derek wasn't just protecting Tyler's aggressive behavior anymore, he was actively using his son as a weapon against other families' children. There's something else you need to know, Rodriguez continued. We intercepted communications between Derek and associates in Arizona. He's planning to leave California within the next 2 weeks. If we don't move now, he'll relocate again and start this whole pattern in a new community. I thought about Emma upstairs, probably lying awake wondering if she'd ever feel safe at school again. Then I thought about all the future children who would suffer if Derek Morrison escaped justice one more time. What exactly do you need me to do? Rodriguez outlined the plan with military precision. I would sign Derek's agreement, publicly apologizing for my false accusations and acknowledging Tyler as an innocent victim. In exchange, Derek would likely become overconfident and expose more of his network while federal agents gathered evidence. The hardest part will be convincing Emma, I admitted. She'll think I've abandoned her. Actually, Emma might be our strongest asset. Rodriguez pulled out another file. Those friends who defended her yesterday. We've spoken with their parents, and they're willing to help. Kids see things adults miss, and they're less susceptible to Derek's intimidation tactics. As we left the diner, Rodriguez handed me a small device that looked like a regular pen. This records everything within a 15-foot radius. When Derek meets with you to accept your surrender, we'll capture every word. The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek Morrison had spent months using recordings and documentation to destroy his enemies. Now his own words would be the evidence that brought him down. I drove home as the sun rose, practicing the speech I'd have to give, an apology I didn't mean to a man who didn't deserve it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Derek's BMW was already waiting. He stepped out as I approached, Tyler beside him as always. But something was different about Derek's demeanor. The calculated control was slipping, replaced by manic energy that suggested a man pushed beyond his limits. I assume you've made the right decision, Derek said, but his voice carried an edge of hysteria. Because I've spent the night preparing consequences that will destroy your family's future permanently. In his hand was a manila envelope thick enough to contain Emma's entire academic future, or the fabricated evidence that would end it. I gripped the recording pen Rodriguez had given me and prepared to play the most important role of my life. You're right, I said, forcing the words out like broken glass. I've been struggling since the divorce, and I took it out on your family. Tyler never did anything wrong. Derek's manic energy shifted to triumphant satisfaction. Smart choice. Now, I want you to read this statement aloud while Tyler records it for our protection. Tyler pulled out his phone with practiced ease, angling it to capture both Derek and me. The casual way he operated the camera told me this wasn't his first time documenting his father's victories. Go ahead, Derek commanded, his arrogance making him careless. Tell the world how you fabricated everything. I began reading Derek's prepared statement, but as I spoke, something shifted in Tyler's expression. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncomfortable. Maybe even guilty. And furthermore, I continued from Derek's script, I acknowledged that Tyler Morrison is an exceptional young athlete who plays with perfect sportsmanship. Dad, Tyler interrupted quietly, maybe we should just let it go now. She's apologizing. Derek whipped around to face his son, and in that moment, his mask completely disintegrated. You don't tell me when to stop. Do you understand how much work I've put into teaching you how to win? How many weak families I've had to crush to clear your path to success? The recording pen in my hand captured every word as Derek continued his rant, apparently forgetting Tyler was still filming. You think talent is enough? You think fair play gets you scholarships? I've spent years building networks, buying officials, destroying competition so you could dominate. Derek's voice rose to a near shout. Those other kids deserved what they got for being in your way. Tyler's phone trembled in his hands. But Dad, Emma's weak. Just like all the others we've eliminated. Derek grabbed Tyler's shoulders roughly. The broken bones, the ruined academic records, the families driven out of town, that's what winning requires. Even Tyler looked horrified now, finally understanding what his father had turned him into. But Derek was spiraling too far to notice. Marcus Webb, the school principals, that pathetic detective who thinks she's investigating us, they're all bought and paid for. Derek laughed maniacally. No one can touch the Morrison family because we own this entire. The sound of car doors slamming cut him off mid-sentence. Detective Rodriguez emerged from an unmarked van, flanked by federal agents, all wearing bulletproof vests. Derek Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, child endangerment, and federal corruption charges, Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying across the morning air. Derek's face went white as he realized Tyler's phone had been live streaming to social media the entire time, every confession, every admission of guilt, broadcast to hundreds of viewers who were already sharing the video. This is impossible, Derek whispered as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. I control everything. I own everyone. Not everyone, Rodriguez replied. Just enough people to hang yourself. As Derek was led away, still ranting about his connections and threatening lawsuits, Tyler stood frozen, holding the phone that had just destroyed his father's empire. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked like what he really was, a 12-year-old boy who'd been weaponized by a monster. 6 months later, I sat in the stands watching Emma score the winning goal in her first game back. Her joy was infectious, her confidence restored, and most importantly, she was playing for pure love of the sport again. Derek Morrison was serving 5 years in federal prison. Tyler was in therapy and living with his mother, slowly learning what normal childhood looked like. And Emma? Emma was just a kid playing soccer, exactly as it should be.